I've already sold the apartment, and as for you, I'm filing for divorce." Those weren't words. They were a gunshot. I had heard Cooper's voice 1,000 times, over coffee, in the car, in bed, but this time it sounded different, calm, cold, and almost as if he was enjoying it. I was standing in the kitchen, cutting apples for a pie, the smell of cinnamon, vanilla, comfort, and in an instant, it all became foreign, almost vulgar. The knife fell from my hands. I heard it hit the tile. It didn't break. Too bad. My name is Anastasia. I'm 56, and I always thought I knew who I was sharing my life with. Cooper. He was the kind of man people were drawn to. Smart, confident, charming. He could charm even my mother, and she thought even pizza without dill was suspicious. But behind the charm was emptiness. I didn't notice. Or maybe I didn't want to notice. He left easily, almost cheerfully, as if it were all just a game. But he made one mistake. The apartment he supposedly sold, it was registered in my name, legally. I could have thought, well, at least I have something left. But no. I didn't know then that this was only the beginning. He didn't just betray me. He tried to erase my existence. And if he started this war, I'm not going to lose it. But to understand how we got to this point, I need to go back. Back to the little moments that felt like background noise. Because everything he tried to destroy, I'm going to rebuild. But this time, on my terms. It's funny, but that evening, I baked the cake anyway. I stood in the kitchen while the dough was rising in the oven and thought, who am I baking this for? Him? Myself? Or the version of me that still believed in us? I didn't cry. That struck me. Instead, I felt a strange silence inside, like all my feelings had receded into the shadows, leaving behind only one thought. What is he up to? Then I went to the study, our study, although he hadn't set foot in there in years. Too messy, he used to say, but I knew where the documents were. Cooper always thought I wasn't interested in papers. He was wrong. 3 years ago, when we bought the apartment, he was on the verge of being fired. I had received a small inheritance from my uncle. We made the deal in my name. For convenience, he said at the time. I didn't think much of it. At the time. Now, I looked at the papers with new clarity. The house was mine, legally, officially, signatures, stamps, everything. He couldn't sell it. Or if he tried, it was a scam. He thought I was stupid, but I just trusted him. I sat down in a chair and picked up an old frame with our wedding photo. I was 32. I looked at that woman, and it hurt. She didn't know that one day she'd be sitting with legal documents in one hand and a court threat in the other. I opened my laptop. Search engine. Can you sell an apartment without the consent of the other owner? The answer was obvious. No. But the question was, did he try? Or was he bluffing? 10 minutes later, I was dialing my lawyer's number. An old acquaintance. Honest. Reliable. Edward? I need to talk. Urgently. It's about Cooper. Pause. What did he do? First tell me, is this a confidential line? And at that moment, I felt something for the first time. Not fear, but interest. Not a victim. Not a wife. A woman who also had teeth. But I didn't know yet that this was just the tip of the iceberg. Cooper had been preparing for this for months, and me? I was just learning to breathe on my own. He thought I'd cry into my pillow, but I was already digging a hole for his plans. When a man starts a divorce with lies, he is sure you don't know how to hold a knife. The next morning, I woke up early. No alarm clock, no desire to stay in bed. Usually, Cooper would already be in the kitchen, but now, the house was silent. Silence without explanation, without apologies, without goodbyes. I made myself some coffee. Black, bitter, like the night before. I usually added milk, and he would say, "Why are you ruining it?" And suddenly, I realized, I always drank coffee the way he liked it. Edward called first. "Listen," he said, "I've looked into the situation. If the apartment is registered in your name, he couldn't sell it. Not legally. Not even with a workaround. Even if he tried, it would be fraud." "What if he forged the documents?" "Then we have a serious case. But you have to understand, this is no longer just a divorce. It could be a criminal offense." I thanked him, hung up. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from anger. Cooper didn't just leave. He tried to destroy me, financially, legally, emotionally. But he forgot one thing. I'm not the same woman he signed a prenup with 20 years ago. At lunchtime, a letter arrived. On paper, stamped, signed. Preliminary notice of divorce proceedings. No appeal, no explanation, just a list of demands. He wanted half of everything, plus compensation for money spent on renovations. I laughed. Lou DLY, too loudly for an empty house. He had started a war. He thought I was weak, that I would panic, that I would back down. But I was just getting started. That evening, I wrote to Clara, our daughter. She lived in another city. I didn't want to get her involved, but now I had to. "Hi, sweetie. Your father and we're having problems. Call me when you can. I'm not okay." And as I sat there, with the phone in my hands, a thought flashed through my mind that sent a chill down my spine. What if he's involved her too? What if this goes deeper than I think? I needed to understand who I had really been living with all these years, because the more I remembered, the scarier the truth became. This wasn't a divorce. It was an operation. And I was the target. You start digging to save yourself. And suddenly, you find something that should have stayed buried forever. I didn't want to dig into the past. It felt over, done. Like an old photo album, dusty, torn, but harmless. But now, every glance back was like a flash, bright, painful, and too clear. I started remembering things that had once seemed like just quirks, like how he'd use my credit card. But say, you don't keep track of your balance anyway. Or how he'd get angry if I was late to meet my friends, especially Lauren. "She's messing with your head. She's going through a divorce. She wants you to fall apart too." Or when he said, "If you ever leave, you'll get nothing. I've taken care of everything." I laughed then. Not now. I opened my old bank statements, and there it was. The first blow. Transfers to an account I didn't recognize. The amounts weren't huge, but they were regular, consistent, deliberate, planned. I took the documents to Edward. "Do you know what this means?" He was withdrawing money, gradually. He was preparing, and he was doing it with your card. Is that a crime? It's intent, and it's protection, for you. I drove home, looked out the window at the houses, faces, streets floating by. It was as if the whole city was invisible, and I was a ghost who had only just realized he was dead. Cooper had been leaving our marriage long before that call. He just did it quietly, methodically. For dinner, I reheated some soup. I couldn't stand it. Cooper loved it. I ate 2 spoonfuls, then poured the rest down the sink. I called Lauren. "Hi, I was a fool. You were married." We were silent, and in that silence, I felt a strength I had long forgotten. But the next morning, something unexpected happened. An email from a woman, an unknown name, subject line. "You don't know half of what he did." I didn't know who she was, but everything inside me tightened, because intuitively, I already knew. She wasn't the only woman in his life. I was afraid to open that email, but even more afraid of what I might find inside. When the truth comes to you on its own, don't rejoice. Usually, it's followed by something you're not ready to hear. I opened the email at 3:14 a.m. Yes, I remember the time. It's as if it got stuck on the screen. Hi, you don't know me, but I know who your husband is, and you should know what I know. I was with him for 5 months. He said you had broken up, that you were sick. I'm sorry. I didn't know. Then I realized. He disappeared, without explanation. But before that, he took money from me. I reread the letter 4 times. Then I got up, went to the kitchen, drank some water, came back, read it again. She'd attached a screenshot, a photo of Cooper, his messages to her, a bank transfer in his name, the date, a month before the call. I didn't feel anger, only cold, icy cold. He lied to her about me, who washed his shirts, about me, who still slept on his side of the bed. I replied, "Thank you. Do you have anything else? Everything is important." 5 minutes later, a new batch of letters, screenshots, photos, their dates, her tears, his words. Cooper wasn't just cheating, he was copying. He promised every woman the same thing, the same words, the same faces, the same expressions. I sent everything to Edward. Could this affect the trial? Yes, it changes perceptions, his image, his motives. I closed my laptop, and for the first time in a month, I felt pity, not for myself, but for her, for women, for each of us who believed he was real. An hour later, another email, from another woman. I was no longer surprised. He collected us like a collection, but now, the collection was speaking. I didn't know how many of us there were, but I knew one thing, we were no longer silent. He thought we would remain broken, but we were beginning to form an army. It wasn't terrible that he lied. It was terrible that he did it with such talent, as if he was proud of it. 2 days later, I had 6 letters, 6 different women, different cities, different walks of life, even different ages, but the same scenario. Cooper was everywhere and nowhere. He appeared like a storm, fast, charming, a little mysterious. He promised to start over, with each of them. And with each of us, he took something. Money, an apartment, trust. To Leah, he was an architect who lost his family. To Rachel, he was a freelancer just out of a toxic marriage. He was anyone but the real Cooper. And then I realized, this wasn't just cheating. It wasn't a double life. It was a pattern. I gathered all the correspondence. I printed it, sorted it, labeled it. I created a folder. I called Edward. We need to move on. This is systematic fraud. He was silent. Then he exhaled. Do you want to press charges? I want him to stop hurting people, anyone. And that was the first time I realized I wasn't just speaking for myself. I was a wife, a victim. Now, I was a witness. Clara called. Mom, are you okay? I was silent. No, but I'm working on it. I wanted to tell her everything, but not over the phone, face to face, no filters. That evening, I wrote to the women. I'm gathering information. Anything you can provide will help. An hour later, I had 2 more. He had been building a network, and now, that network was closing in. In the morning, an unknown number called me. A man's voice. Are you digging up dirt on Cooper? He knew my name, my address. I felt everything inside me, freeze. You don't know who you're messing with. Back off. And right then, I knew. Cooper wasn't just a player. He was part of something much dirtier. What if it wasn't just about marriage? What if everything I thought was personal was just a facade for something bigger? I didn't know who had just called me, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to stop. There are moments when you realize fear is no longer your enemy. It's fuel. I didn't sleep all night. I put my phone on airplane mode. I was afraid he'd call again. Not Cooper. No. He never called. He always acted through others. In the morning, I woke up with a clear plan. First, protect myself. Second, gather everything I had. Third, strike first. I talked to Edward. We agreed to file a lawsuit, not just for divorce, but for criminal charges. He suggested a private investigator. Are you sure you want to get to the bottom of this? I looked at him and nodded. I'm either going down or coming up. There's no third option. The detective's name was Joe, a face you wouldn't remember, eyes that noticed everything. He started with the basics: accounts, digital footprints, hotels, wire transfers. 3 days later, he came back with a stack of information. Are you ready? I wasn't, but I nodded. Cooper had registered under false names. He used other people's documents. He had a post office box on the other side of town, a car registered in his name that I never knew about, and an apartment, rented, secret. Whose money? We both knew. He's not just leading a double life, Joe said. He's leading 2 parallel lives, professionally. I don't know how many minutes I was silent. I could only feel everything inside me freeze, and through that frozenness, anger was breaking through. Joe continued, There's more. He's been seeing a woman, very recently. She may not know. Do you want to talk to her? I closed my eyes. I imagined myself. Her. All of us. Yes, I want to. I want at least one of us to hear the truth sooner rather than later. And then, I realized everything he'd done was a game. But now, it was my game. The only question was, who would make the first move from which there would be no turning back? He had spent years building his lies, and I was going to destroy them in one evening. Sometimes you look into a stranger's eyes and see yourself, painfully, betrayed, awakened. Her name was Hannah, 34, a nurse. Joe found out that Cooper met her at the clinic, while being treated for stress. He told her the same story. His wife had gone crazy. They were getting divorced. He was looking for peace. We met at a coffee shop. I didn't tell her who I was. Just, I need to tell you something. About the man you're with. She tensed up. I understood. I would have too. I handed her the photos, correspondence, bank transfers, and only when she read the first message did I say, I'm his wife. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She just said, Damn. And then she cried. We sat there for an hour, not as rivals, as women who had been used. She told me he often disappeared, that he never let her into his home, that he never called her by name, only, baby. I knew. It was his way of dehumanizing her. What are you going to do? She asked. I looked at her, at myself, at all the faces I didn't know, but felt were there. I'm going to talk, the whole truth, to the whole world, if I have to, through the courts, through the press, through the walls. Hannah said, I'll help you. I don't want to keep quiet either. And then, I felt something shift. I was no longer alone. That evening, I printed everything. All the documents, messages, proof. I knew it would be difficult. Court isn't justice, it's a game. But I wasn't afraid of losing anymore. The next morning, I found out Cooper had changed lawyers. Now he was being represented by a man known for his dirty tricks. He was going all in, and that meant, so could I. He hired a predator, but I was no longer prey. You know it's war. When your enemy takes you seriously for the first time. His new lawyer? Martin Sloan. He's known for winning cases even when the evidence is right there on the table. Smart, cynical, unprincipled. Edward paled when he heard the name. We'll have to be twice as careful. He'll go after you personally. Your character, your mental state, your family, everything will be used against you. I nodded. I knew. And still, I went ahead anyway. We gathered all the evidence, documents, bank statements, testimonies from the women. My story was part of the mosaic, but I was the center. And then, Cooper filed a counterclaim. He said I was harassing him, ruining his reputation, mentally unstable. And suddenly I saw it, his plan. He wanted to make me look crazy, to twist everything until truth sounded like a delusion. Edward said, "If we show a pattern, this won't be a divorce. It will be an accusation, and he knows it." And that's when I made my decision. I gave an interview, not for show, for the record, anonymous, no faces, just facts. One online magazine published the piece. The headline? "I wasn't a wife, I was a cover." In the comments, hundreds of stories. Women, men, people who had been through the same thing. They wrote to me. They thanked me. They offered help. And Cooper? Disappeared. His social media accounts went silent. His lawyer stalled for time. But I knew. He hadn't gone away. He was biding his time, hiding behind fake accounts, new lies, and one very skilled lawyer. But this time, he didn't have his greatest advantage. I was no longer afraid of the truth. But one question still burned. If he was such a skilled liar, did that mean everything was a lie? And if even a little of his love was real? Why did he do everything he could to make me hate him? I didn't win everything, but I got back what mattered most, the right to be myself, without him, without fear, without lies. The trial lasted 6 long months, half a year of hearings, documents, strategies, and tears I wouldn't let fall in front of him. I saw Cooper in court 3 times, and each time, he was less of a man, more of a shell, something that used to be human but had no center left. He barely looked at me. Only once, when I testified. His eyes? Cold. But for a second, there was confusion, because he didn't recognize this version of me. The court didn't give me everything. The money, only part of it. The criminal case, still pending. But the victory? It wasn't in numbers. It was in power. I kept the apartment. His claims? Rejected. And me? Untouched, unbowed, unowned. The media picked it up. More women came forward, some even publicly. Cooper vanished. Rumor has it he left the country. I didn't check. I didn't care. I focused on home. I repainted the walls, changed the dishes, threw out everything that smelled like him. I kept only one thing, a photograph, of me, smiling, alone, with a cup of coffee, no caption. Clara came for the weekend. We baked that cake, the one I sliced the day he told me we were over. She looked at me. "You're smiling again, Mom." I smiled back. "I'm breathing again." Later, on the balcony, evening air. "Do you hate him?" I paused. Then, "No, hate is still a connection, and I want to be free." Some stories don't end beautifully, but some women do. Even in the ugliest stories. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't a win. It was a return. To myself. And real returns aren't loud. They happen in the kitchen, in the mirror, in your own breath. He thought he'd destroyed me, but he was wrong. All he did was give me a reason to start living, for real.